Hey everyone, Julian here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make synths like Lauren. As usual, get the project file and samples from this video in the description. And yeah, let's dive in. So the first sound that I have here is this one. It's this little drone chord thing that I made with analog. It sounds like this. And so the way that I made the sound was basically with a saw wave and a little bit of white noise, which is going into a bandpass filter. It's set like this, so yeah, just pretty simple. This is what's kind of giving it that like filtered sound. Like obviously this sounds kind of like sampled and sort of like, yeah, just a little bit more rough around the edges. And part of that is the filter. If I turn this off, it sounds a little bit more like a synth that's like just sort of very much there and in your face. But yeah, so this kind of, filters it and just puts it in the background a little bit more. I also should note I have LFO 1 on the frequency of that filter, so you can see it's on there a very small amount. But it's just giving it a bit of motion throughout the track. So then after that, I have a bit of vibrato, and then a bit of unison as well. Pretty straightforward. The vibrato just kind of, gives it a bit of that kind of tape-ish pitch warble, and then the unison gives it a bit of like a chorusy kind of effect. And yeah, so then after that I have this low pass filter, which might seem odd after the bandpass. The reason why I did this is because the bandpass kind of lets through a little bit of frequency stuff still. It's only a 12 dB per octave of attenuation thing going on there, so yeah, I just wanted to give it a little bit more of a cut in the high end. You can hear the difference there when I turn it on and off. That's pretty much that. So then after that, I have a bit of echo here. So I have the two ears. They're not synced. They're playing two different things. And what this does, it just gives it more of like a stereo kind of thing. You can see like these lines don't quite line up. And yeah, it just gives it like I said, some kind of more stereo with it's sort of like moving from ear to ear a little bit more with those delays. And yeah, finally after that, I just have a bit of erosion. It's just adding a nice kind of like crunch at the end of the sound. Now as far as the notes go for this, I'll show you really quick. It's just playing a basic D sharp minor chord. That's what key this song is in. So yeah, so then the next thing that I have here is this lead, which sounds like this. So this is two layers. We have this one, and then this one. The first one is made using analog. I have a saw wave and then a square wave with a bit of the pulse width thing going on there. You can see I had the pulse width at 95%. So when you pitch this up and give it that pulse width, it tends to give it that kind of like cool sort of like old school cinematic kind of synth sound. So yes, that's kind of what I was going for. And then I have those going into this low pass filter here, which you can hear is just sort of opening with this envelope. Pretty straightforward. I have the amp envelope set like this. And then after that, what I have is I have a bit of saturation, just kind of beefing it up a bit, giving it a bit more warmth. I have an echo, which is similar to that last one I showed you. I have the two ears not linked, so they're playing two different times, and it gives it, yeah, a bit more kind of stereo width and just sort of like some space. And then finally, I just have a bit of reverb on there. And then for the next layer of this synth, it sounds like this. And the way that I made this one was with FM. So I have a sine wave and then another sine wave here. You can see, yeah, this is just kind of set like this. I have the envelope opening that second one up. And the coarse pitch on oscillator B is up to 4 as well. And then after that, I just have those going into a low pass filter with a bit of resonance. So that's where that kind of like filter sound is coming from. And yeah, then finally in operator here, I just have a bit of an LFO on the pitch. You can see it's on there. And this is similar to the vibrato on that other synth. It just gives it kind of like a pitch warble. And yeah, it just gives it some kind of interesting stuff. So after that, I have a bit of chorus. Pretty simple. It just gives it more of a watery kind of sound. And then finally, I just have a bit of reverb on there at the end of the chain. So that's the lead. And then for the notes on there, I mean, it's pretty simple. It's just kind of droning on with this simple pattern. This is something I've heard Lauren do a lot. Like, he tends to have these kind of synths that just sort of go in the background while, like, the bass line and the chords are doing most of the movement. So yeah, so then the next layer that I have here is this little granulator noise thing. It sounds like this. So what this is it's this sort of atmospheric noise sample. That one. And what I did was I put it in the granulator and then I turned the spray up a bunch. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Basically, if you don't know what the granulator is, it's a granular synth. What granular synthesis is basically like a sampler where it plays through a sample, but instead of just playing from start to finish, it plays like start and then like over here and then over here. Like essentially what it does is it plays different random parts of the sample back at different times. So that's kind of what's going on there. I just had that playing this one note. And then if you listen to the original, there's kind of a bit of weird low end in that, so I filtered it because I really just wanted that kind of like top end stuff. This is nice because it kind of does the same thing that like putting some vinyl crackle or something like that in the background would do, but instead it just is a little bit of a different kind of texture to it. So the next thing that we have here is this little thing, which is also made with granulator. It sounds like this. So the way that I made this sound was I started actually with this operator thing. I started with this. So what I made was just a simple synth. It's just playing this little G sharp and then an F sharp. And then, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. So what we have is just kind of like a simple kind of like FM sound, 2 sine waves going into a low pass filter. And you can see I just kind of did a bunch of processing on that. I made this kind of interesting sound. And then, yeah, what I did after that was I bounced that down so you can see that here. This is just that as an audio file. And then what I did with that was I reversed it, and then I froze it so it would stay reversed. And then I put that into the granulator. So this is kind of a nice technique because you can see I just put this in on C here. And yeah, if you make like a little synth sound like that and then put it into a granulator, you get like this cool drone where it's sort of like jumping between notes in this really interesting way. But then when you make it yourself, you don't have to worry about it being in key. You don't have to like second guess if it's working or if it's not, or whatever kind of thing could possibly be the case there. But yeah, this definitely gives you a lot of freedom to kind of make some interesting textures. So that was that. After I had that, I just put it through this auto pan, which is set like this, a bit of amount, or the amount is up a bit, and then I just have the rate down kind of slow as well. And yeah, this just gives us like some nice stuff in the high end. Like if you listen to it without this, and then with it, it really stands out there in that one sort of spot. So yeah, so the next thing after that I'll show you here is the kick, which sounds like this. Oh, whoops. So yeah, this is just a pretty nice, like, punchy kind of kick. Pretty straightforward. This is the kind of kick that Lauren would usually use, like, just something kind of punchy like this. There are some parts where you can see where I, like, reversed it. That just gives it, a bit of a different kind of feel. And it gives it, like, some interesting vibe as well. It kind of takes it off the grid. This is something I've heard Lauren do quite a bit in his tracks. So yeah, so then the next thing that I have here is this little drum group, which sounds like this. And so this is basically like all the percussion. The reason why I don't have the kick in here is because there's a bit of saturation on the group. That sounds really good when you have just these elements going through it, but then when you try to put the kick through it, it just doesn't quite work, so I just put the kick out separate from this. But yeah, so in here we have 3 main things. First thing that I have is this hi-hat. So this is just a simple, like an 808 style hi-hat. I pitched it down a bit, and then it's playing this like 16th note pattern where it's kind of like going up like that. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. Just kind of like a simple, sort of like intense pattern. This gives it a lot of hype. Like a lot of the energy and the hype of your track is in the high end, so having a hi-hat with like a really, really sort of frantic pattern like this helps to give it that kind of intensity. So the next thing we have here is this clap, which sounds like this. And so this started with this clap. So I took that, and what I did was I put it through some saturation, so you can see I have the drive up there, kind of making it a bit fatter, and then I have the wave shaper on. You can hear that pretty pronounced. That's definitely doing a lot to the sound. I think it's kind of just like bringing it out and sort of like, yeah, enhancing what I liked about it. So then after that, I have a very small amount of echo. You can see the dry wet is like really low at 9%. That's just helping to give it a little bit more space. If I turn it off, yeah, it just adds that little extra bit of kind of like space, I suppose. And then finally, I just have a bit of reverb on here, which you can see is set like this. I turned the high cut up a bit so it would kind of let through a little bit more of those high frequencies. And then I have a pretty long decay time for like a clap. Since there's so much space between the hits with this one and it's so punchy, you can really make this one work with like a lot of reverb. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Just like a nice kind of punchy, sort of organic sounding clap. And then the last thing that I have in this drum group is this sort of like impact sound, which sounds like this. So this is kind of like the sort of effect thing that you hear under the kick. The idea is that it's supposed to kind of be like one instrument. I wanted to do this because in the low end, Lauren uses a lot of this kind of stuff. Like in his tracks, he never really has like, or a lot of times he doesn't just have like a basic kick like this one that I have. A lot of times it'll be something kind of like in the low end, either like a bass or just some kind of like impact sound or something like this, kind of just sitting underneath everything. And yeah, just sort of like tying that low end together and giving it more texture. Like what this does is it kind of makes it feel more alive than if you just had the kick. Like if I play this beat without this, it's still cool, but this thing is just adding that like kind of organic feel to the drums. So the way that I did it was basically I just took these two little impacts and then I just put them in here with the kick, and then there are some little kind of like extra parts. Like I did a little thing here. Stuff like that, like I pitched this one up and then reversed this. And then at the end here, pretty similar. So, you know, it's just kind of like going through and doing things. And yeah, this is just a nice layer. Again, sort of add some texture to the low end and around the kick. Now, I do have a bit of effects on here. Just have a bit of saturation. And then I have an EQ8 cutting out the lung because I wouldn't want this to get in the way of the bass or anything like that. So then on the drum group here, you can see I have a bit of saturation. Here it is without it. And then with it. So you can hear it just helps sort of tie everything together and like put it all under the same umbrella. I have a bit of drive on that, and then I use the wave shaper to just kind of go a little bit deeper with it. So the next thing that I have here is this bass, which sounds like this. So this is pretty nice, or it's a pretty simple, kind of like nice, powerful bass. Basically, it's just playing this chord progression. This is, like I was saying, kind of where a lot of the movement is in this track, because like the melodic stuff is really just very steady and just playing like the same thing. But this bass, you know, keeps moving and keeps the chord progression going. So I made it with analog. What we have is two saw waves, a little bit of white noise, going into a low pass filter with an envelope on it like this. And then after that, I have a bit of saturation, which just has, yeah, a bit of drive kind of beefing it up. And then finally, I put it through Ableton's amp, just to give it a bit of kind of like texture. Here it is without that. And then with it. So yeah, it helps to give it that kind of like really distorted, sort of blown out Lauren synth sound. So then after that, I have this bass, which sounds like this. So this is kind of like a more like neuro style bass. And yeah, I just made this with Operator. It's just some simple kind of FM stuff. I have a saw wave, and then I have this waveform where it's a sine wave that I just added this little harmonic to, and that's pitched out +4. And I have a little bit of fine tune turned up on that as well. That's what gives it a lot of the modulation, is the kind of like, yeah, that like sort of respace style effect. And then after that, I just have those going through a notch filter. So then after that, I just had this phaser. Pretty straightforward. It just kind of shapes the sound a bit. And then I have the saturator here, which is just set like this. I got the wave shaper and the drive. This one's pretty strong. Yeah. After that, I have a bit of reverb. You can see I have the size and the decay time turned down, so this is what gives it that space, but I don't want it to be too long, so I just have it turned down a bit. And then after that, I have an amp, pretty straightforward. Then we have some more distortion with Ableton's drum bus here, actually. I just kind of, set it like this. I use the drive and the crunch to kind of distort this some more. And then finally, I have one more distortion with the saturator, which you can see I really just used for the wave shaper. I don't have any drive. Yeah, it's just doing the wave shaper thing on that one. And then finally, it's going through this auto pan, which is set up. You can see I have the phase at 0, so it's doing this mono kind of like volume pumping effect. And yeah, that's that. It's pretty straightforward. It might seem a little bit kind of crazy. The only other thing with this sound is I do have this LFO, this Max for Live LFO. You can still use this project file. If you have Ableton 10, you will have Max for Live, so you can use this. But yeah, essentially what we have here is you can see I have that on the frequency of this saturator, of the wave shaper here, and it's just kind of moving that. If I turn the depth up on that, you can kind of hear what's going on. And yeah, so then finally, I have a bit of processing on the master. Mostly, I just have the saturator here. So what we have going on is just a bit of drive. And then I have the color mode on analog clips. So this does actually impact the sound, even if I haven't touched any of the knobs. So yeah, this is just adding a bit of drive. The thing is, this is kind of similar to what I was saying with that drum group before, where it's like putting some saturation on your master or on a lot of sounds at once kind of puts them all under the same umbrella and just makes them sound like they're sort of in the same world sonically. So yeah, so that's pretty much it for this one. I just want to make a quick one, sort of explaining some tips I heard listening to Lauren's music. Yeah, so thank you for watching. You can get the project file once again and the samples from this video in the description. And make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you thought in the comments. You can check out my social media, which is on the screen right now. And yeah, thank you again, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another tutorial.